Berbers are a people indigenous to a huge swath of land known as Tamazgha, which stretches from western Egypt to the Atlantic coast, and penetrates deep past the Atlas Mountains into the Sahara Desert. Never a single people, the Berbers were divided into many diverse tribes, whose cultures, dialects and social structures, although closely related to one another, differ from region to region. While Berber is still the most common nomenclature in the West, the Berbers refer to themselves with a variety of names in their native Afro-Asiatic languages, chief among them the Amazigh, a title which typically translates to the free people. Over thousands of years, Amazigh society has been molded to thrive in the harsh desert environment. Traditionally, the majority of their tribes lived by driving flocks of livestock between pockets of oases in a semi-nomadic lifestyle. In 814 BC, Phoenicians from Tyre established the city of Carthage on the coast of modern-day Tunisia. In time, this oligarchic merchant state would expand its control over much of the Berber-dominated African coast. Another classic civilization to come into contact with the Berbers was the ancient Greeks, who in the 7th century BC colonized Cyrenaica. The Greeks, in their walled coastal cities, intermingled with the Berber around them, sharing many aspects of their cultures with one another, when the iconic Punic Wars erupted between Carthage and Rome. Various Berber tribes fought alongside both Mediterranean superpowers. Despite the best Alp-crossing efforts of Hannibal, the Carthaginians were decisively defeated in the Second Punic War, losing all their territory outside of their Tunisian heartland. The victorious Romans bequeathed much of the North African coast to the Amazigh tribes that had been allied to them. These tribes subsequently went on to form the United Kingdom of Numidia. This kingdom, alongside the neighbouring kingdom of Mauritania, became the first true states in the Berber homeland to be ruled by the Berbers. Harmony between Rome and the desert dwellers did not last long, and in 112 BC, war broke out between the expanding republic and the charismatic King Jugurtha of Numidia. Although the Amazigh monarch used clever diplomacy and his warriors fought bravely, employing guerrilla tactics, they were ultimately defeated by the Romans under Marius and Sulla. This kickstarted the Roman conquest of the Berber coast. In the 5th century AD, the western half of the Roman Empire began to crumble, allowing the Germanic Vandals to conquer parts of North Africa. During this turmoil, the Amazigh were able to establish several small indigenous kingdoms in former Roman territory. In 641, the armies of Caliph Umar had conquered Byzantine Egypt and quickly turned their gaze westward to the fertile coasts of the Maghreb. The Muslim conquest of North Africa was a long and grueling process that began in 647 and was only completed a full 62 years later. Throughout it all, the Amazigh put up brutally stubborn resistance. Unlike the Eastern Romans, the native tribesmen were well accustomed to the fast-paced desert warfare of their Arab foes, and were able to match them toe-to-toe. Perhaps the greatest symbol of Berber resistance was the warrior queen Dahia, who crushed an army of the nascent Umayyad Caliphate near the town of Meskiana in 698. Nevertheless, she was defeated at the Battle of Tabaka, and with her death, the lands of the Berbers were quickly conquered, becoming the Umayyad province Ifriqiya, from the word Africa that the Romans used for the same region. It was also during this century that the Trans-Saharan trade network began expanding, linking the Arabic world to sub-Saharan Africa, which subsequently introduced the Muslim faith to many communities in West and Central Africa, such as the powerful Empire of Ghana. Despite all this, the Amazigh were undoubtedly a subject people. While in theory, the Quran holds all Muslims equal under God, the Berbers soon found that in practice, they were still second-class citizens compared to the Arabic elites. Heavy taxation was another budding issue. Under the Pact of Umar, Jewish and Christian communities under Muslim rule were guaranteed safety, but in return had to pay a regular tribute known as the jizya or poll tax. Arab governors of the Umayyad province of Ifriqiya began imposing the poll tax on Muslim Berber converts, in direct violation of Islamic law. One such Arab governor was a man known as Yazid ibn Abi Muslim, who assumed control of the province of Ifriqiya in 720. Historians condemn Yazid as a pointlessly cruel man who treated his non-Arab subjects with contempt, even branding the hands of his Berber guardsmen. This was a step too far, and the Amazigh in Yazid's employ had him assassinated, with the introduction of a sect of Islam known as Kharijism to the Maghreb coast. The Kharijites were hardline egalitarians, believing that any man, regardless of descent or social status, could rule the Muslim world so long as he was uncompromisingly pious and just. However, the most committed belief of the Kharijites was that if a Muslim ruler should fall to corruption and sin, it was not only their right, but their God-given duty to rise up in rebellion against them. The ball finally got rolling in 739, when the Gomara, Bagwata and Miknasa tribes of western Morocco rebelled against the Umayyad Caliphate. They waited until the local Umayyad general Habib ibn Abi Ubaidah sailed northwards to lead an expedition against Byzantine Sicily, and upon his departure shaved their heads in Kharijite fashion, bound Quranic scriptures to their spears, and marched out for battle. The great Amazigh revolt had begun. Soon it spread across the deserts of the western Maghreb. The city of Tangiers quickly fell to al-Mitghari's rebel army, who executed its Umayyad governor, Umar al-Maradi, a detested man whose tribute policies had previously been bleeding the Amazigh dry. The rebels then carved a path of destruction from the Strait of Gibraltar to the Sus Valley, toppling Umayyad garrisons along the way, while more and more Berber tribes joined the cause. However, a column of elite Arab cavalrymen, made up of the aristocratic elites of Ifriqiya, clashed with the rebels in the outskirts of Tangiers, halting their advance and forcing al-Mitghari to pull his armies back to Tangiers proper. Condemned for his cowardice, al-Mitghari was deposed and executed by the Berber chieftains, and was replaced with Khalid ibn Hamid al-Zanati, the charismatic chieftain of the Zanata tribe. Khalid was declared the Caliph in a direct challenge to the authority of the Umayyad Caliph, and immediately went back on the offensive. In the winter of 740, his army met the Arab cavalry in a pitched battle at the Shalaf Valley, utterly crushing them and killing 10,000 Umayyad soldiers. This was a massive victory for the Amazigh, as the flower of Arabic nobility in the western Maghreb had been utterly decimated, and the remaining Umayyad forces in the region were in complete panic. Finally, having heard of this uprising, Umayyad general Habib ibn Abi Ubaidah abandoned his Sicilian campaign in a hurry. He returned to the Maghreb, where he garrisoned Tlemcen and sent a plea for reinforcements. Before long, an army of 70,000 was looking westward, ready to retake the land lost to the rebels. The Umayyad army marched out in October of 741, meeting their foe at the town of Bagdura on the Cebu River. By now, the rebel Amazigh army had grown to a massive size, with some sources claiming that over 200,000 Berbers had joined the cause. It should also be noted that most of these were not professional soldiers, but laymen armed only with stones and knives, making the figure more plausible. The Ifriqiyan Arabs, having faced the Berbers in battle before, knew not to underestimate their foe, and warned the Syrians to avoid open battle. This warning was ignored by the Syrians, who believed the rebels to be little more than a disorganized rabble that would break upon the impact of a heavy cavalry charge. However, anticipating the oncoming horsemen, the Berber forces skirted around the enemy steeds, using slings and spears to bring down their riders. The rebels then tied bags of water to the tails of wild mares, driving them mad, before sending them stampeding into the main line of Arab infantry, which prevented them from reinforcing their overextended cavalry. The Caliphate's cavalry was eventually encircled and massacred, while the infantry was overwhelmed by the sheer number of the Amazighs. News of this victory at Bagdura encouraged more and more Berbers across the Umayyad realm to rebel. In Islamic Iberia, Amazigh soldiers stationed on the northern frontier abandoned their garrisons to wage war on their Arab masters in Toledo, Cordoba, and Algeciras. This revolt was eventually crushed, but it did allow King Alfonso I of Asturias to take advantage of the unrest and double the size of his domain. Meanwhile, the gains of the Amazigh back in North Africa were put to a halt when they failed to take the provincial capital of Kairouan in 742, allowing the Umayyads to retain control over the eastern Maghreb. Nevertheless, the Great Amazigh Revolt had secured the freedom of Morocco and its environs. This would be the first time in history that the Caliphate suffered major territorial loss, and the first time that an independent Islamic entity existed outside of the Caliph's authority. In the centuries that followed, the ancient and ambitious tribesmen of North Africa would expand and unite under their own unique brands of Islam, forging some of the most powerful empires in African history.